Welcome, sir. Honorable members, just be in order. Welcome to the panel, and we just need a few things from you. First of all, just to tell us who you are by way of introducing yourself, but beyond that, you also inform us as to why you were interested in the post. And then finally, if there are issues around the conflict of interest, please tell us so that we avoid members to raise those issues because they do check candidates. But welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for members for giving me this opportunity to present my credentials to yourselves. I'm DK Mohuba, abbreviated Dinkwanyane Mohuba. I work for the University of Limpopo as the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication. I'm the university spokesperson in the last 21 years. And I'm part of the executive team of the university by virtue of being Executive Director of Marketing and Communication. I am also serving in the council of the university by virtue of being an executive, and also serving in other committees of council as and when is necessary, but most importantly, on the audit committee. I am also part of the Senate of the university, which is also a governing body in terms of academic affairs, and also Senate committees where a number of issues are discussed before they're presented to Senate. I am also a member of the Executive Committee of Senate. And I also serve in three capacities. I'm in charge of three departments, which is marketing and communication, safety and security, and in acting capacity, responsible as an acting dean of students, which has got quite a number of units. Now, the second question, why am I interested? I believe that I have got necessary credentials, having been in the management of the university in the last 8 years, executive management, and also being in the media industry for the last 21 years, and having the appropriate qualification which allowed me to participate nationally and also internationally to showcase my expertise. And I have also served in a number of boards, which accounts to my knowledge of corporate governance, and my current studies also are related to corporate governance at a doctoral level. So a little bit of research has been done, although it is still work in progress. I have also chaired some boards, and I'm also still a member of certain board, and I was also a board member in an engineering company which I resigned in 2016. And maybe the reason why I resigned is because I'm employed by the organ of state, and then in order for one to be compliant, I had to resign so that I don't act in conflict with the laws of the land. Hence, I resigned. But I'm still a shareholder, but not a director. As to the issues of the conflict of interest, I might not recall any in terms of conflict of interest, especially in the board, unless if there is anything that one is not aware of that might actually be brought to the attention, and I'm willing to clarify if there is anything that pertains to that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just on the conflict of interest.
Yes.
There is a section in Broadcasting Act.
Yes.
That we use as the committee. To be specific, section 17. Are you familiar with the issues that are raised there, A, B, C, D, And if you are, just tell us what are those issues.
Well, maybe one of the issues that accounts to declaration of interest would be maybe have I done business with SABC before?
Yeah.
And my answer is no. I've never done business with SABC before. My second question would be, are there some individuals who are working at SABC that I know? And my answer is yes. They are being in the media industry for the last 21 years. One would have obviously built a relationship with certain persons who are employed by SABC, and others I have been to school with at Stellenbosch University, for an example, in 2013, who are executives at SABC because we are attending an executive development program. Do I have any financial interest in SABC? I do not have any financial interest in SABC. Have I been found wrong in terms of the act? I've never, except the mere fact that I did a lot of interviews with SABC in the last 21 years that I've been the spokesperson of the university.
This clause goes beyond yourself as an individual.
Yes.
Also the family members.
Yes.
Can you go there if share with us?
Yeah. If I recall, I don't remember any of my family members bearing the surname Mohuba or any other surname that is related to the Mohubas working for the SABC. Hence, I'm saying there would be some students of the university who completed their BA in Media Studies and who know me and who are working at SABC, and also former employees of the university that I would know who are not necessarily bearing my surname, but who are employees of the SABC, and somewhere, somehow, I might have mentored them in the course of my experience in the media sector.
The last one. Broadcasting Act is being amended. We are in the process of amending it as the committee. It's work in progress. So are there any specific areas in the Act that you think you as Mr. Mohuba, you can contribute in that process of amending the bill?
Yeah. Chair, thanks very much. I think the Broadcasting Act is very clear. And I think one of the areas that I feel which has always been a bone of contention, whether you read it from the media or you read it from anywhere else in terms of reports, is the role of the shareholder. And what limitations does the shareholder has in terms of how he's supposed to behave? That's number one. The second part is the behavior of the board members. You know, there's a clause that I looked at which speaks to the removal of the board members. And what I thought should include is the process that must be followed in declaring one of the directors delinquent, so that it's not an arbitrary removal, but there has to be a process that must be followed in terms of the removal of a director. Because sometimes you might find that we use vindictiveness instead of being informed by facts when we remove directors. So it should actually be clearly spelled out. I think also the issue of the editorial independence, for an example, is a hot potato. And I'm glad that, for sure, what is currently happening in the country, where there are some roadshows regarding the amendment of or reviewing of the editorial policies, that would actually add a value. At the core of that is also the issue of the corporate governance. You know, separation of powers. What does the shareholder do? The board does. Non-executive director to an executive director. The limitations in terms of knowing who does what and who does not do what, and what space do we create amongst ourselves so that there's no conflict. Because you don't want to see a situation whereby, by virtue of being a shareholder representative, you usurp the role of the board or the board usurping the role of the executive directors who are employed full-time when they're supposed to execute the objectives of the board. I think that is a little contribution that one would make in terms of the Broadcasting Act, Chair. Thank you.
Members, I'll start with Honorable Kalako.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure of your surname, whether it's spelled right. Is it Mohuba or?
The surname is Mohuba, M-O-H-U-B-A. Mohuba.
Yeah. But M-A. Thank you, Mr. Mohuba. For me, you have just mentioned, because my interest, if you have been following what have been happening in the ad hoc inquiry around SABC, is exactly, and the recommendations, they send around flouting of legislative and governance framework, flouting of the board charter, and also, I think, ignoring or trying to tamper with the correct memorandum of incorporation. All this govern how the SABC must be run, even PFMA. So what I want you to do for me is to just briefly, how do these relate in making sure that the relationship and the roles between SABC board and the executive, between SABC board and the stakeholder, between SABC board and the regulator, because those are the key to me if we want things to be right. The last SABC board was found wanting on that, let alone the other side of the corruption side, which was still having to, there are still forensic investigation around those issues. Then the other question, Chair, is I've looked at your CV here. With your qualification and experience, how would you contribute towards avoiding all what have happened? You must know we have actually dissolved 3 to 4 boards until this one, which we have dissolved. And all of them were found wanting or not following the acts and all the internal arrangements as outlined in the documents as I have actually mentioned. So how would you avoid that again? Because it's not that those documents and the acts were not there, and this legislative and governance framework were not there, or PFMA was not there. Thank you, Chair.
And unfortunately, we'll have to respond in 1 minute.
In 1 minute, yeah. Thanks, Chair.
The number took 4 minutes.
I'll try to remember to respond. Yeah, I think the relationship between SABC and the board is very clear in terms of your MOI, in terms of the what you call the Broadcasting Act, and also in terms of the SABC Charter. I still fail to understand, when the things are so unambiguous in the documentation, why we are failing to implement them. I still do not understand why, as a person who has got fiduciary responsibility, would fail to implement that, and that conflict creates a serious discord between SABC and the board. And I want to repeat what I said. When you want to usurp somebody's responsibility, that is where the conflict comes into be. It means you are beginning not to respect policies of and procedures that you said you are going to respect when you came in for interview. And all of the persons that we have indicated in terms of those boards are the persons who stood in front of this parliamentary committee and made a commitment that they will respect that. It talks to your morals and your ethics. If you have got ulterior motives other than saving, you are going to find yourself doing things that are not prescribed by the law. That's one thing for certain. And I think in terms of my CV, as you are correctly putting it, I've been very strong in terms of that area, in terms of respecting procedures and processes that we establish. And that's number one. The regulatory body, for an example, I mean, you have got your ICASA, which sets regulations as to how the SABC should, not only the SABC, any other broadcaster should be able to behave. And it's very clear and very unambiguous. And you say to yourselves, why, if the ICASA is making a recommendation, and which is a regulatory body, is making a recommendation, why is that recommendation? Because they would give you an opportunity to present your case. They don't just make a recommendation without actually involving you. And you have put your case and they make a recommendation that should be implemented. And then in terms of the stakeholders, SABC, for an example, has got a number of stakeholders, and the public is a critical stakeholder. The minute we fail to have confidence in terms of the image and the reputation of the public broadcaster, we begin to have a problem because it shatters everything. And how does it shatter it? No one would want to watch the news. No one would want to invest. No one would want to make sure that he buys advertising space in the SABC, either in radio or in television, because the image is tainted. How would a person want to invest on the tainted image of an organization? So it's very important that we have to create confidence in the stakeholders, not the public alone, even the investors who would want to put their adverts on the SABC to make sure that I'm making a correct investment so that my money is not going to be trashed. Given my experience at the board level and also at the management level, I should be able to instill a sense of consciousness into my fellow board members to say, this is what we are not supposed to do. And supposing I'm being empowered, overpowered by other board members, maybe an issue being put to a vote.
You'll have to round up. Your time is up. You'll have to round up, just round up.
That's the last item. For sure, there would be a process whereby if you have a conflict with fellow board members and maybe have a conflict with fellow shareholder representative in terms of breach of certain governing principles, for sure there's a recourse, and that recourse will be utilized in order to air my views.
Thank you. Honorable Kongobele, I will do this before you. I'll do this, Honorable Kongobele, and then I'll go to Honorable Van Dam, Van Dijk, and then Honorable Madisha, and then Honorable Loz. Welcome, Honorable Loz. Van Dam Davis. Did I say Van Dijk? Oh, I'm used to saying Van Dijk. It will be in that order, honorable members. Honorable Kongobele.
Thank you, Ndate Dinkwanyane Mohuba. Am I correct?
Thank you. You're correct.
You've got a very seemingly rich CV.
Thank you.
But up front, just for statistical purposes, can you share one achievement from this CV? Just one. That's first point. I'm sure you're writing. Yeah. Because it can't be so rich without something to say what it has delivered. And then two, I just want to share with us SABC, the Broadcasting Act being the establishing document of the institution and also its organization, if you can share key objectives you know about the Act, just the key objectives, not all of them. And three, there is I think you touched it, by the way, the issue of journalistic independence or editorial independence. It occurs in the midst of many things. If you go to the charter speaks about the shareholders' dialectical conflict. The shareholder who is supposed to be shareholder in running the board, which needs some autonomy. And the shareholder who is supposed to be on behalf of government, which is also supposed to set regulation and so on. If you can share with us, how in those gray areas do we actually run SABC to achieve its primary objectives?
Okay, can I
I
continue?
want to give more time to you.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at the first question that you asked me relating to achievements. And I want it to be relevant to this interview.
Sure.
Yes, I think what the first achievement is that I was able to be a board member and a shareholder of a consulting engineering company for a period of 10 years without any scandal. You can check that for your record, Chair. I think that is very rare in this country for somebody to serve that. And the second part is that I've been at the my apology. The key objectives of the Act. And I think I've dealt with the issue of the achievements, and I want to go to the key objectives of the Act. And I also want to be relevant because if I don't mention this one, which is a key factor, and when it is not arrested, it ends up spilling on other things. And I will say that instilling of the principles of corporate governance in any organization, because it talks to a lot of issues, but it's fundamental. It talks to a lot of issues. That area needs to be respected. One would have gone into all the reports, even the parliamentary ad hoc committee report. Critical to that is the collapse of the corporate governance. And when corporate governance collapses, it means the whole bureaucracy, which is your shareholder representative, and your members of the board, and your executive directors, they will end up doing as they wish because there's collapse of corporate governance, which is very important. The gray areas, and I think that's the reason why we have got these amendments that are needed. And I want to repeat what I said. You have got your memorandum of your MOI, and you've got all these legislative frameworks, but you still find people going beyond and not respecting the prescripts as they are stated. And I think the what you call the amendments will clear those inequities, will clear those areas. For an example, if you have got, and as I was sharing with somebody, is to say, the clear role of the shareholder representative need to be defined. And the shareholder representative needs to know the limitations. And the board needs to know that this is what is expected of us. And I think the charter should be the Bible of every board member. And the MOI should actually be the Bible for both the shareholder representative and also the what you call the directors. So, and the executive also should be able to be conversant with limitations. If you go into the reports, for an example, and I can cite two reports which talks about
Your time is up, but finish, round up.
Which talks about the collapse of corporate governance. There are quite a number of things that are cited. You know, when governance collapses, there's no supply chain management policy that exists. Anyone wakes up in the morning and say, my limitations are 100 million, but because there's no system that is in place, I can approve 200 million. Thank you, Chair.
In that order. Honorable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for making yourself available. From your CV, it seems you're very experienced. And just from listening to you talk, you seem to be quite knowledgeable about the SABC. Now, we want to obviously appoint the best people, South Africa's best, to serve on the SABC board so that we don't go through the recent era that the SABC had to go through. So give me one unique characteristic that you have that nobody else that has applied has. What makes you unique? What are you going to do for the SABC board that nobody else can do?
There's one thing that keeps me very outstanding from the rest. I'm a decision maker. Because if you don't have people who are capable of making decisions, you're going to have a problem in that they're going to be fluffy, and decisions that are made are based on laws and regulations that are governing the corporation. So decision making is my strong point.
Lots of people make decisions. I mean, I don't think being a decision maker has a unique characteristic. Decisions were made at the SABC to do the wrong things, and that's why the SABC found itself in the situation that it did. Other than being a decision maker, because everyone will say, no, I'm very good, I make strong decisions. What other characteristic do you have that makes you special and different from anybody else?
The second one is respect of policies and procedures that governs the institution and making sure that you apply them to the latter. And if there's a need for a deviation from those procedures, for sure the regulations will allow you to follow a certain process that accommodates the deviation and not deviate for having not been informed by anything.
Okay. What are your views? If you could give me one policy that you'd implement at the SABC to change the way that it's currently working. So what unique idea do you have about improving the way that the SABC does its business?
One of the things that I would say about SABC is not very present and available in terms of, unless if it can be available for all the wrong reasons. When you think about SABC today, you only think about the wrong reasons. And that is exactly what was happening. And I think my PR and my communication skills will be able to safeguard the image of the SABC. I was looking at the website of the SABC, and I'm saying, you have got an SABC foundation which is doing some great work, but I mean, who's showcasing that? So that we don't only look at the negative, but we also look at the positive things that are happening. Currently, we're sitting with an interim board, and from the comments, I mean, they're doing wonders. But who knows the information so that the perception of the public about the SABC changes. So my PR skills, my media communication skills, my marketing skills and all this will help to resuscitate. And my stakeholder engagement skills will also help to resuscitate the image of the SABC. Because surely there would be some executives who are charged with the responsibility of communication. And working with them, we will be able to say, this is where we want to see the new SABC. We don't want to read, we don't want to focus on what had happened. There are certain processes that are being followed in order that what had happened gets corrected. But we need to move forward and make sure that the image of the public broadcaster is retained.
Thanks. I do agree that communication is definitely an area that the SABC needs to improve. My final question On your application, it says that you were nominated by former students of the University of Limpopo. I mean, that's
Yep.
very broad. Who are these people?
Well, I'm not sure what I should name the persons or the process that was followed. I was sitting at home doing my studies. As you can see in the CV, I'm doing PhD. I was at home, and then some former students came to my house and said, "We think you're available." And I said, "Okay, but this is why do you think about me?" And you see, people outside, they observe certain things that yourself might not actually be able to do, to observe. And then they said to me, I think your experience, your skills qualifies you to be in the leadership of the university. I mean, if people want to nominate you and see a certain skill and see that you can add value to one of the SOEs in the country, which is bleeding, then I accepted. And then they asked me to put the what you call my qualifications. They asked me to write my CV, which was always available, but one has to tweak it to accommodate this type of a gathering. And that's exactly what I did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Davis.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Mr. Mohuba, for being here with us.
Thank you.
Obviously, the duty of the Portfolio Committee is to ensure that the board members who are appointed are beyond reproach. And this is your opportunity to clear the air if there's any allegations of impropriety against you. So I'm going to give you that opportunity with my questions. My first question relates to a Mail and Guardian article that was published in 2012, which said, and I quote, that you move in the same business circles as the former Premier of Limpopo, Castle Matale. Can you confirm that you do move in business circles with the former Premier? And if so, can you elaborate on this for us? And this is important to us because there is a clause in the Broadcasting Act which says that any board members must disclose their financial interests, especially if they relate to telecommunications or broadcasting or print media. So please, can you elaborate on that? My second question relates to a newspaper report, also in 2012, that alleged that you were involved in irregularly awarding a University of Limpopo contract to the Friends of the ANC Youth League. Now, according to the report, there was a university investigation, there was a public protector report. Can you please tell us about this investigation, what the outcome was, and whether you were implicated or found guilty of any wrongdoing in that investigation? And then my last question is...
Can I get the third one?
Yeah, this is the third one coming.
Okay.
Yeah. It has been also reported that you personally persuaded the University of Limpopo to host the ANC's Polokwane conference in 2007. I'd like to ask you what business case you presented to the university to host the conference, and whether or not you regret persuading the university to do it, considering that the ANC didn't end up paying for that conference and owed 6 million rand for that conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Davis. Let me start with the article in the Mail and Guardian of 2012. Maybe start how I responded to the article, because I remember I gave a response of 52 pages, with all the annexures to the guy who was running the story. And the story had allegations that I am in business with the former Premier of Limpopo, Castle Matale. And I'm not going to claim that I do not know Castle Matale. I've known Castle Matale in the early 80s when we were still students at the university, but he was not a student. And secondly, I've got no business interest with Matale, except that me and Mr. Matale are staying in the same suburb in Polokwane. So you can do whatever kind of investigation. I have never had any business interest with Matale. And also, that in my response to those allegations, I had actually indicated to the journalist of Mail and Guardian where I've got personal interest. One of the things that they also did, I think they was confusing me with my brother, because they listed the name of the former member of parliament, Mr. Thaba Mufamadi, who is a friend to my brother. So for sure, the journalist was confusing me with my brother. So that is the answer to number one. The second part was what irregular contracts to the ANC Youth League members. And I want to be very specific. They were talking about a certain forum. And I want to indicate that even today, if you can bring 3 people outside there and say, do you know forum? I will not be able to point at that forum. It was just malicious intention of the journalists publishing wrong things about me. In the first place, I don't even sit in the procurement committees of the universities. That's number one. Number two, I don't sit in the council tender and fiscal planning committee, which awards tenders. I don't sit in there. The only time when I see tenders is when we're sitting in the full council, where you look at the reports coming from committees, and I don't chair any committee of council that deals with tenders. Number 4 is that I am in the executive management of the university, and the rules of the university says any tender process that is coming from operational tender committee does not go into the executive management, but goes straight to the council tender committee, so that management is not seen to be interfering in that process. Number 3, which is the 2007. I'm an employee of the University of Limpopo, and by then I was a director for PR and communication, and I was assigned responsibility to be the project manager of 2007. And during that time, I had an opportunity of meeting quite a number of very important people during that time. I was merely a project manager of a process of the university. Now, when you talk about the business case, part of the things that I was assigned to do was to sit with the then provincial secretary of the African National Congress, and that person happened to be Castle Matale.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohuba.
Thank you.
The other conference before 2007 was in 2002 in Stellenbosch University. Stellenbosch University. Honorable, was it Matisha or who came first? Matisha. Honorable Matisha.
Sbatagong,
Tobela.
Laron,
Rensimogolo wa ka re ka kwa go lena.
Tswe.
Tobela.
Pardon, Chairperson, Mtlega Zulu. Okay, I won't go far. It is a known fact that the past board members and the various boards that have passed were involved in mismanagement, in corruption, in political interference. And when I talk about political interference here, I'm actually talking about, an instance where a particular political party will be up there, okay? I'm not saying this political party. I'm saying a particular political party will be reigning supreme, and while others are not actually recognized, basically because of persons who are high there in the leadership. Now, that is a problem because it denies our people that which they're supposed to receive, a proper a democracy, listenership and everything and so on and so on. Now, how are you going to deal with this one? Should you be appointed? And the other point I want to raise is the issue of the SABC management. A particular manager or a group of the management, it's alleged they took some money from SABC and they have funded another political, I'm sorry, what is that? TV station, okay? Now, that is part and parcel of management that I'm talking about. How are you going to deal with this whole thing?
Lawyers, when they don't want to answer questions, they say the matter is sub judice. And I want to be very careful in terms of how I'm answering some of the questions, because there are certain processes that are unfolding, and I don't want to find myself in danger of having said some things that I will regret later. And with due respect, especially on the funding of the television stations, and I think there's a process that is currently being followed, and then I think the president of the country has also signed some proclamation to allow the state agencies to go and investigate. But supposing there was no such, obviously it was wrong for the management and a group of managers to collude to do that, but that still has to be established further, because there would be criminal activities or criminal proceedings preferred against those who have transgressed. And I think PFMA is very clear in terms of provisions as to what needs to happen after such things have been done. Now, the same applies to, and let me look at the political interference, because it doesn't look very dangerous compared to the mismanagement and the corruption element which the state agencies are dealing with. Interference on its own is problematic, because it compromises your independence. And this brings a confusion as whether is this a state media or a public media. Because in terms of the channel of independence, editorial independence, we obviously know who does what and who does not do what. And the journalists, they've got certain areas where they cover. But we have got the group CEO, who's the chief editor-in-chief. And then we've got also the group executive responsible for the news. And then he has to be able to look at the editorial values and what are the editorial values of the SABC. We look into that, and then from there he should be able to subscribe to those editorial values in order that the news become relevant, responsive, accountable, and representing the views of the public, but not representing the views of whatever alleged political party that you are speaking about. So interference on its own is just problematic, because you need integrity in the news, the integrity in the news that are being broadcasted, so that the public are able to trust them, not to be championing a certain cause.
Thank you very much. Honorable Doza.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have a name tag here, you see, so that there is a proper address. So can I be organized, the name tag, so there's equality in the house? Thank you very much. Mr. Mohuba.
Sir.
We live in a serious era of a poverty of integrity. Some of the people, even by mere association of their brothers, who may be engaged in forms of conduct that are questionable in terms of the law, get to be doubted whether they will be able to stand the test of integrity. I am undersatisfied with the ways in which you dealt with the questions of Honorable Davies. I'm going to use the first part of my time to give you a proper opportunity to define clearly what is it exactly that you call your relationship with Castle Matale, with the Honorable Castle Matale. Clear, don't circumspeculate, speak directly in relation to that questionable conference in terms of the money of the university that is very poor, that still has problems with money to this day for its own students, and the ANC that did not pay it. But also, you know, the fact that it gave us a wrong president. But I mean, I'm just saying, what exactly were you about to say about that conference and your involvement in relation to Castle Matale?
Remember Castle Matale was the provincial secretary.
Kancane nje baba, kancane nje. When you came in, we explained as to how many minutes a can you switch this one? Can you switch? But also, can you stop it?
This one.
No, it doesn't matter. I can hear. It's between yourself and the candidate. You share 5 minutes. So you ask questions such that he is able to respond to all of them within that 5 minutes. Unfortunately, you came after we have explained that. But also we stopped members to delve into political issues like the factions and the wrong president and all that kind of thing. Over to you, sir.
Just quickly, in 2007, 2006, when I was asked by the university to be the project manager, obviously the host province was Limpopo, and I had to work directly with the provincial secretary of the ANC, and that was Castle Matale, and that was our relationship. That's number one. Number two, the monies that were owed by the ANC to the university had since been paid. About 3 years ago, 4 years ago, yeah.
Do I still have? Okay, yeah. My last one is, what do you think of President Zuma's administration actions in the SABC? What do you think of this administration's actions in the SABC? What could be the one thing that is important for you to being in the board, which is your reflection about his administration in relation to the SABC?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to say on the basis of reports, and I'm not going to generate anything new. My worry is the previous shareholder representative in terms of what is alleged to be interference in the board. That becomes my serious worry. That becomes my serious worry, because if you take advantage of your being at a superior level and not respecting the rules and regulations, the Broadcasting Act, the MOI, the Shareholder Compact, the Charter, and all, undermining that at that level is obviously very worrisome to say, is this the right custodian for the policies and the procedures of the whole thing? And I can only speak about the shareholder representative who was the Minister of Communication by then, because there would be allegations but which cannot be proved. That there was a mandate from the president, there was something, it was all in the papers, but I mean that cannot be proven. But what can actually be cited is what is in the documents, and also looking at what the other committee report was saying, and also the presentations that were made by various publics regarding the issue that is contained in the report of the other committee.
I'm happy that you dealt with the question on the basis of political interference. I think you dealt with it in that fashion, not necessarily names and all of that. Yeah. Thank you. Members, the 5 minutes left is to be shared by all of us. You didn't speak. Honorable Sede, you didn't speak? Okay, no, you're right, we didn't speak. Thank you.
Mr. Mho, part of the reasons why the SABC is battling with the financial situation, according to them, is the challenge of unfunded mandates. What's your take on that? And what contribution will you make if appointed a board member to deal with this particular challenge? I'm sure we are writing because I have, I think, 3 other questions that I want to raise at a go. In your view, okay. In your view, what's the relationship between the SABC? What should the relationship between the SABC and the regulator be? And what is the current state of affairs? And if appointed a board member, how do you see yourself improving this current state of affairs? And the last one, digital migration. What does it mean to the SABC? Thanks.
Okay, it's over to you, and then remaining is Honorable Machoba and Honorable Tolash.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is an outcry in terms of reviewing the current model, the funding model, as you're correctly putting it. But my view is that let's not change for the sake of changing. Let's look at what works and how do we then augment it. And for an example, I mean, you've got the what you call the TV license as a one form of revenue generation. Then you've got the government, which is putting in money also through the National Treasury, and you also have got advertisers. And my view is that this must be retained. And I'll give you a little example of what I observed yesterday as I was coming to here. And as I was passing either Langa or Nyanga something, and I was asking the driver, are DSTV satellites given free of charge on the left-hand side? And he was saying, no, the people here are only paying for DSTV, and they are not paying for TV license. And I'm looking at how then do we collect TV license, which is once off, and then the DSTV, which is paid monthly. And the question of the affordability cannot be a challenge in terms of to abandon the issue of license fees, for an example. And I think it needs to be stepped up so that more is done in order to generate that. But the other thing that I think should be infused is that, you know, we're preaching content. And as we are preaching content, what kind of investments are we making to make sure that the content is actually sponsored or invested into? And my view is that you have got a Department of Small Business Development, which speaks to empowering of a number of areas, and I think they should be able to invest a certain amount of money into SABC to promote local content. Number 2, you've got the Ministry of Arts and Culture, for an example. The whole crux of arts and culture activities resides there, but how do we then make it that it is known so that the skills of the people and expertise of people in the rural villages are seen? Therefore, there could be some element of resources invested in order to showcase. Because my view is that...
Through you, Chair, if you can move to the next question, otherwise you won't finish all of them. You still have
the digital migration, for an example, I mean, is very important. But as a view, it's very important because it brings quality in terms of what we shall be seeing. What worries the delay in terms of implementation, but I happen to know through my other information that is delayed by the court processes, which is disadvantaging the majority of the people because we need. But the other element is the question of the cost. And I think much as it is arising, there's a way in which the issue of the cost can be addressed, more especially that you see our people affording the DSTV, for an example, and whose public mandate is less. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tolasha.
Honorable Chairperson, Mr. Mohu, I appreciate the fact that you are a very educated person, well versed with many things, but I'm just worried, where would you find time, given the situation that the SABC is in now, noting the fact that we have an interim board that terms is finishing on the 26th of September, therefore needed a board that is going to come in and move with the necessary speed. Where would you find time of serving in this particular board that, to an extent, we can then say it is facing a serious crisis?
The SABC being in the board, and I guess it's not like a full-time job. That's number one. And part of the things that the board would be expected to do is to develop a turnaround strategy. And when you have developed a turnaround strategy, there would be some executives, that strategy being accepted by the board. There would be executives who are charged with responsibilities of making sure that the objectives of the strategies are achieved. And how do you then make sure that the strategies are achieved? You make sure that it becomes part of the performance contract, and which is monitored on quarterly basis. So a board is there to develop that strategy based on the reports that are already available. So it will require one maybe to attend 4 board meetings per annum, or if you become a member of the committee, and well-functioning committees do not actually meet many times. And I think the process is to restore credibility within the board so that you don't have a crisis after crisis after crisis where committees are meeting more than so many times. And if indeed we say we want the board that will respect policies and procedures and also respect various legislation and legislative framework that are governing the SABC, there would not actually be a need to meet quite often. And when the strategy has already been developed, which deals with issues that have been raised. But maybe at the first entering level, maybe the first 3 months, you might actually want to be dedicating time. I'm an executive of the university, and in terms of the other boards, which is we meet twice a year, because there are established procedures that are there which are not in conflict. And then time is not a problem. The council of the university, where I also sit, meets 4 times a year, and I also sit in the audit committee, which meets about 4 times a year. So I would be able to dedicate time in terms of my role in the SABC board. Thank you.
The last one, Chair. Yeah. In the history of the SABC, which board you might say it's performed the best since the establishment of the SABC?
I think I'm going to be a little bit biased in terms of answering that question, to say when Professor Njabulo Ndebele was still the chair of the board, and when the late Matsipi Kasaburi was still the chairperson of the board, I think that those were the times. And I think when Trikamji was also part of the board, I think there was a sense of respect of the policies and procedures and also the governance framework.
I think the first round is done. I will allow one follow-up from you, Honorable Kalako, and your team, and then allow one follow-up question from you, Honorable Van Dam, and your team, and then Honorable Madisha, if there is a follow-up question, and Honorable Ndlozi, if there is a follow-up question. Honorable Davis? Honorable Davis?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 very short follow-ups, so I hope that that's okay. Mr. Mohuba, you said that when I asked you about your business interests and your links with, or alleged links, let me say, with the former Premier, Castle Matale. You said that you wrote a 52-page response to the journalist.
Yeah.
But then you also said that the journalist had confused you with your brother. So can you clarify, did you write a 52-page response just to tell the journalist that you are not your brother? That's my first question.
Okay.
And if not, what was actually contained in the 52 pages that you gave to the journalist? The second question is, you said that the article on tender irregularities was malicious. Why did you not take any steps to correct that article, either by suing the journalist for defamation or at least reporting the newspaper to the press ombudsman?
The 52 pages, I indicated that included annexures, just to try to justify what the journalist was asking. It was not only dealing with Castle Matale, it was dealing with a range of issues that relates to alleged corruption, not against me, but against the University of Limpopo. Remember, I'm the spokesperson of the university, and I have to get information and also respond. So the response was in terms of the questions that were raised by the journalist in 2012. I might not be able to recall all of them now, but specifically on the one that speaks about my relationship with Castle Matale, and I still maintain that I did not have any business relationship with Castle Matale when the journalist, and because I challenged the journalist to say, give me evidence that shows that I've got a business relationship with Castle Matale. Unfortunately, that has not come. Now, the whole response and the questions that were raised, there was an eager to go to sue. And the university uses Flaxman attorneys in Rosebank. We presented our case to Flaxman attorneys, and they advised against any action that must be taken. And I mean, we presented our case to the lawyers. They are reputable lawyers of the university, Flaxman attorneys, and then they advised against us taking any action until such time. So we were advised not to take any action by the lawyers of the university, because it was not dealing with me, it was dealing with the institution per se. And I take instructions from my bosses and also instructions from the governance structures, because this was also debated at council, and it was the feeling that no action must be taken.
Thank you.
Based on the advice, yeah.
Thank you very much. Honorable Madisha.
Well, you did, in my opinion, attempt to address this particular point, but one would actually want to have a proper understanding. You know, this relationship of the representative, the shareholder, that's the minister in this instance, okay? The board itself and the management, that has created problems throughout. I mean, for a very, very lengthy period in the country, okay? Affected workers did all these things, etc., etc. Kindly indicate, how are you going to deal with this kind of problem should you be put or rather appointed on the board? Thanks.
I think one of the recommendations coming from the ad hoc committee on communication is to clearly have an understanding, and I believe that members of the board will, either new or old, will go through an induction process, and that induction process will clearly indicate what is the role of the shareholder representative, and what is the role of the non-executive directors, and what is the role of the group CEO. Because the indications are there, the what you call the prescripts are there, and the only thing that needs to happen is to pick conscience of them and make sure that you apply them. The charter is very clear in terms of what the minister is supposed to do. Secondly, the charter is very clear in terms of the role of the board and the responsibilities of a director. And the charter is very clear in terms of the three executives who are part of the board, being your group CEO, being your CFO, and being your chief operating officer. And I think if all of us have gone through an induction process, and morally and consciously and ethically so, respect what is contained, we shouldn't actually be having a problem. Hence, earlier on when I was asking a question, if I sit in the board and I realize that there is impediment on the prescripts and is perpetuated, for sure there would be a situation whereby I will have recourse other than that of the board or other than that of the shareholder representative, where I can actually raise my views. For sure, when such issues come, they will be reported to this very same committee to say there is instability. And in my own view, I would be able to say, in the board, this is what I have said, and this is how I was ignored. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ndoze.
Thanks, Chair. I still don't have a tag. But two questions quickly. You said earlier on there was a PP investigation, a public protector investigation. What were its findings in relation to you? That's number one. Number two, how differently would you have dealt with Hlaudi if you were in the past board? That is Hlaudi Motsweni. Thank you.
Well, in terms of the PP report, which appointed the public protector raised the issue with the Department of Education, for an example, in terms of the allegations that were brought forward. And in that report, I was, obviously my name was mentioned in the dossier that was presented to the minister. But I was exonerated. Some of the things that were raised were they were found to be not having any substance. I'll give you an example, Honorable Ndlozi. You know, when you say I slept at the hotel which costs the university 1,600 and I must be disciplined for that, when students are sleeping at the very same hotel, and I mean that was very unfortunate kind of a finding. Is there on records. I mean, those are the things. And then the second finding was that I was entertaining guests. Part of my responsibility is to entertain guests. And that's exactly what I did. And it's contained in the rule book of the institution. By being an executive director, part of my responsibility is entertainment of guests and stakeholder relations. That's exactly what I did. And the ENY report was saying I must be disciplined for entertaining guests. That is why the Council of the University and the ministers just shelved that report and say, we wasted a lot of money.
Thank you. Honorable Tsedi, only one follow-up, Mr. Honorable Ndoze. Sorry.
Chair. Mr. Mkhu, there is a debate which suggests that the powers and the role of the executive directors of the board need to be reviewed. What's your take on that?
You know,
the three executives in this case, you know, the group CEO, the CEO, and the COO and the CFO. So there is debate which says their role there in the board is problematic.
And that reviewal, Honorable, is not innocent. And the reviewal is informed by the previous behavior of the executive directors who were in the position. And in the process of managing and governing, when you have given certain people responsibility, you have to time and again review as whether this thing is relevant and this one is relevant and this one is not relevant. Maybe because of the past experience, some of the executive directors who were sitting in the board assumed the responsibilities which were not theirs. And unfortunately, you would have other board members who are, for lack of better word, who are seen to be colluding with the executive director. Hence, this reviewal my view and my experience is that the executive director is necessary, but how should they behave in the board? Because in terms of my experience in other boards, they become resource persons. Because board members, they don't sit in each and every committee. In the full board meeting, you would have the chairpersons of the committees giving reports about what transpired in their various committees and in their various functions. Now, the the executive directors are there as the resource persons in order to clarify certain matters pertaining to the whole operations of the SABC. But if you allow them to assume certain responsibilities as it had happened in the past, that's where you need this kind of a reviewal in order to say, we limit you until this level. I sit in the boards, I sit where I'm an executive manager. I only come in when I'm supposed to clarify. If I find myself in the debates, it means I'm defending a certain status quo which might not necessarily be correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohuba.
Thank you, Chair.
That's the end of it. If you have questions to members, you can ask. Here are they. Waiting.
No, I don't have a question, Chair. I still have to travel back to Johannesburg now. And my asking of the questions might delay. But I think I had a very candid kind of an interview. And it was very thought-provoking, and then I think I would be able to add value to the SABC board.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have the last candidate before we break for dinner. In fact, we have 3 candidates left for today. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohuba. Go well.